for those of you that don't know her already, Mai-Britt Zocca is the founder and CEO of Biotech. She's also been on the board of and also an executive in other companies, biotech companies here in the Copenhagen area. So she has a lot of experience in the, from the side of creating a company and running it. And I thought it would be good to start with Biotech. So you founded the company in 2015 through a deal with the Tech Transfer Office at the University of Copenhagen. Yeah. So can you tell me a bit more about why did you think this technology was promising, and also some details about the deal that you set up with the office?
First of all, of course, I didn't found Biotech myself. We were actually 5 who went together and discussed the opportunity. And I think the most important part was actually that we had no seats on board to actually facilitate that we were able to make the deal with the Tech Transfer Office to spin out the technology. And what we actually did in the group of us founders was to try to understand, so how do we actually leverage the best way possible the technology and build the best business, of course, for also the investors that should be interested and join us, was to secure that the technology and the targets that we span out from the university hospital was actually secured inside Biotech, not only that target but also future targets. So that we actually spent some time to work on, and I think we got a very good agreement with the university hospital that we are still very happy about. I think that was important for, not only Biotech as a small company, but also for the competition that we could foresee could come up with all the other targets that our scientific founder is very eager to bring into the clinical testing, and also, of course, eager to commercialize. So we have a very active scientific founder, Mads Hall Andersen, who is, he's really among, I think, the top professors when you look at IP and patenting, and we wanted to secure actually the value inside Biotech. So that was one thing we did, and I think we have also with Novoseed actually liked that agreement ever since, and we still leverage our clinical development in through that infrastructure that we have built through that agreement. What was your second part of the question?
It was mostly about the...
and why did I think the technology was interesting? So actually, I did my PhD in Immuno Oncology before that was called that. So my PhD is from the back of the late 90s, early zeros. I did a translational immuno-oncology study where I took peptides into basic research, tested the T-cell responses to these peptides, and that was actually brought then during my PhD years to NIH, NCI, where they do clinical testing of those kind of peptides. So I was able to actually take basic research here from Copenhagen and bring it closer to the clinic in NIH. That was before immuno-oncology was even a field of its own. Nobody actually thought that it was a viable career path. So I was often blamed to actually waste my time and my brain on something that was completely uninteresting for most people. But actually my scientific heart has ever since been in that kind of field. So when I sat down with the scientific founders, we actually were easily able to agree on the importance of this. And this came on the back of the great discoveries that came with a Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2018 with the PD-1 CTLA-4 inhibitors by Jim Allison and Honyu that actually then brought these antibodies to the market in 13 and 14 and 15. So based on this whole boost and explosion of the area, we founded Biotech.
You were mentioning earlier that that competition is a big problem, right? Specifically in immuno-oncology, right?
It's incredible. It's the field I'm working in, and I really think that it's really incredible. So just if you look at clinicaltrials.gov and you look 1 month and then you look again, and then there is an explosion of new trials. So by every 6 months, I think we can add in the hundreds, maybe even in the thousands of new trials coming up, testing new compounds, new competition, new combinations, and so forth. So it's really a rapid growing field, and fierce competition exists.
Yeah. You said you joined it when it wasn't even a thing.
It was not even to talk about.
Were you expecting it to become that big?
No, I think that most of us, I mean, when I was at the NCI in Washington, and most of actually today's technologies come out from many of those people that worked in that lab. So many of the persons that we are speaking about today, I was actually among those people in those more than 20 years ago time. And I think we never imagined this. So I can mention, for example, the meeting that is called ASCO. 40,000 oncologists every year goes to Chicago and participate in ASCO. And ASCO in 13, 14, and 15 was only about immuno-oncology. It was overwhelming. And we were all so excited. We never would have thought it. I mean, that was, it was really thrilling.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a bit more about, because you, as you said, you have a scientific background. So why did you move into biotech, and then why did you decide to stay?
Yeah. So during my PhD years and coming back to Copenhagen after that, I actually come from Panum, where I did my PhDs also. Money to research was really not a lot, and the field, as you understand, I was working in, nobody cared about it. So I was offered a senior scientist position at the University Hospital in Herlev, so I worked together with Inge-Marie Svane, who is also a co-founder of Biotech, and I did some work there. But still, while we were applying for new funds and trying to set up some research projects around my topics, I was actually asked to come and work as a consultant in a spin-out from the Cancer Society, also here in Copenhagen. So that spin-out was built on research where they actually took out dendritic cells from patients, they modified them in the lab, and then they gave them back as a dendritic cell-based cancer therapy. And at that time, again, it was in the area of immuno-oncology. Nobody really cared about it, but the company was set up at a small entity with 5 people, and at a point they were able to attract private investors, and I was called in to help setting up some of the research and the immune monitoring of the patients to participate in their trials. So while I was there, I actually was very excited about this new field for me to be involved in a biotech company that was very, very new, and also the possibilities that existed. And within a very short time, I actually had to make a choice. Should I stay at the university hospital and continue my postdoc period as a senior scientist there, or should I actually move forward into the biotech field? And when they offered me to come and join as a CSO, so scientific officer, I slept one night and then I accepted, and I thought I will never get such an offer. And I just joined, and I have never looked back. It was just very exciting, and I helped build up the research lab there from 0 persons, and then until we were, at the time when I left the company, we were more than 20 people. I think we were 25 people. So
Yeah, I think so. You ended up leaving the company. I think it was at the moment where there was like financial problems. Can you tell us a bit more what the challenges were?
Yeah. So the company was based on private investors, and mainly investors from the real estate area that had become very rich on real estate. And when the finance crisis hit everybody back in 2008, we had just actually raised enough funding from investors in Singapore to continue phase 2 trials. So we had managed to actually run 3 phase 2 trials. We also had an affiliation in Singapore where I was a part of the board. And in Singapore we ran 1 phase 2 trial, and here in Denmark 2 phase 2 trials in lung and colorectal cancer. And we were ready to actually make the next leap. And overnight we just got withdrawal of investment from the investors that just had come on board. And we started, and we also had just joined a big EU financed grant where we had set up actually a new technology in type 1 diabetes with cellular therapies, and all that over the next 6 to 12 months I had to start actually scaling down. So I spent most of my time actually letting people go, closing down projects, getting rid of agreements where we were financially having liabilities and so forth. And you can imagine that after that period I was tired. I really had used all my energy and I thought that new energy should come to the company, so I actually resigned. And they tried to keep me, which I thought was positive, but I really wanted some new fresh blood and energy to come in and re-establish the company. So I left in 2010.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in general in entrepreneurship you will always find challenges, failure, but I think it's always good to hear from those examples, to see what people learned. So I wanted to ask you also about, I think it was Levos, another company that you were involved with that ended up closing a couple years ago. Yeah. So what happened there? What was the challenge again? Yeah. What did you learn from it?
So this was a completely different field. So I have worked mainly in oncology, but I have helped spin out a company from the university in Aarhus, actually from Flemming Besenbakker's lab in Aarhus, based on nanobiology. And there they had a small scaffold where you could actually use it for regenerative medicine to actually regrow, for example, cartilage. And I was very excited about this technology. It was really showing great results, and the way that the structure was able to attract stem cells, and you could actually insert this structure, 3D printed structure, inside, for example, a pig model, and then you could see that the cartilage started rebuilding in their knees. The killing experiment, where we actually had achieved funding from it was called Højteknologifonden at that time. Today it's Innovation Fund. Actually made us able to take this technology a step further and closer to phase 1 testing. And those killing experiments actually didn't show at all the expected results. It was so disappointing that we didn't really know what we should do, and we discussed for quite some time. So what do we do? Do we try to reconsider which kind of killing experiment then we should make, or how do we actually embrace these very disappointing results? We ended up deciding to give the technology back to the university again, so they could actually further develop it inside the university. And I think this is a very important part of how you can actually also decide that that is not a failure. It was actually something positive for the technology, because we were not at all ready to attract investors to invest in the technology based on the very few data we had at that time. So I don't consider it as a failure myself personally. I think it would have been really very hard to have continued develop it at that time.
Yeah. And you've also been involved in other companies, not as an executive on the board, companies like Biotech and Onconox. Yeah. And so what's your experience with that? Because you're involved in a lot of different things at the same time. Is it something that you are learning from, or is it how challenging is it?
Yeah, so I mean, Onconox and Biotech are two very different entities. So if we start with Onconox, I actually founded Onconox after my period of the financial crisis and so forth, together with Hans Skamby, who is also here in the house, the CEO of Biotech. And we did that back in 2010 or 11. And Onconox have we just exited it early this year due to a very sad story of one of our founders that unfortunately died. But Onconox was set up as a oncology program where we took in IP from a university in Milan and also in Sicily, and we tried to develop it here in Copenhagen through 5 founders we were again. And we ended up again not really reaching the first round of results that we expected, but then we actually continued to build in IP in the company, and Onconox ended up being a vehicle that actually took in IP from Italian universities, which we developed to a certain point and then licensed out to other companies. So it has actually been a great story for us founders, and we exited it early this year, so I'm not involved there any longer. And VAR2 is a little bit different story. So I co-founded VAR2 back in 2012 together with some researchers, great researchers over at the university in also here in Copenhagen. And after now being on the board and being a co-founder for 7 years, I actually made a decision in New Year's last New Year that I wanted to review my own CV. And I resigned from the board at VAR2 to also actually devote my time to some other activities, and of course mainly to Biotech.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think this is a response of the company growing or getting to a later stage?
Yeah. So of course, I mean, when you sit in a board, you have your, I mean, the experience you have and what you can add to the board at different stages also demand different people, and again it's about energy. Yeah.
Okay, sure, for sure. Something I also wanted to ask you about is investors, because obviously for any company that you want to create, you need investors, and it's actually quite interesting that our second speaker is an investor in Biotech. So from your point of view, what should an investor bring to a company you are creating? What should they, what can or they should they do?
I have only one answer. Money. And enough. So I think, I mean, I'm of course grateful for everything that Novo Seeds have done for not only Biotech but many other companies in this area. I think they are doing a tremendous work and great work. So I think when we founded Biotech, it was a little bit of a different time. Maybe we were on the way of changes, but we founded Biotech with an investment of 0.5 million euros, I think it was. And today that would actually be considered very, very little money. And I think also we already had clinical data, so we founded the company based on clinical data, and the leap we should have been able to take as a company actually would have maybe today attracted more money at the starting up period. But again, it's different time now compared to those 5 years ago. And then of course not only money, because also of course they come with a lot of experience from other companies, also of course with network and so forth. So I think you really leverage on the knowledge they have sitting in. I mean, for Stefan and Nana, it's almost double-digit number of boards where they come with experience and can bring to the boardroom and so forth. But of course, also setting you up with the right people when you go out. And
okay. Yeah. So could you have made that negotiation different if it happened today?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, without doubt. Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
think also maybe you can agree to that since you are here. I think we have learned, all of us, but I think this is what is happening today also. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's quite interesting. So you've been involved in so many companies here in the Copenhagen area. So I want to hear your views from what the landscape is looking at the moment for companies here.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, I think that it's really great times, and this is not something I've been asked to say, but I think that BII is really a fantastic initiative. So I'm having my office down on the second floor here in this building, and I think it really have brought a lot of value to Cobis as a house itself to have an initiative like BII. There's other initiatives in the surroundings that are coming up, and also of course bringing awareness to biotech as such, and also I think at the universities there's a much better awareness. This is actually an okay way to go and explore your career and so on, and maybe you can even come back to academia after 5 years out and so on, and circle back and forth. I think that's much easier for the young people today.
Okay, yeah. So you've seen a very big difference from the time you started?
Yeah, because I mean, back then when I was just finishing up my PhD, I mean, it was still just the black side of everything to leave university and go, and I mean, you did not even go to Novo Nordisk, you needed to go to a unestablished biotech company. How stupid can that be? I mean, so full of risk and so on.
Okay. Yeah. We do have some time for questions. If someone has any, yes, please.
Hi, myself Aishwarya Gokuldas. I also work with. Sorry, my voice is not loud enough. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So myself Aishwarya Gokuldas. I'm also in cancer immunotherapy field, like for the past 5 years. I was in industry. Now I'm doing my PhD in Ingmar's group.
Okay.
So it's so fascinating to hear your story, how you kind of like transformed from the academia to the industry. My question is, I could see like back in days when you did Immuno Oncology, I know the story, nobody believed in immunology to be part of in oncology. Still people think that other targets would be better, but still, I see that you fought through it, right? Because you stick to the field. Since I could see that you had a lot of passion to be part of this science. And then you left that research and moved to the industry, and you even moved for like a different industry. How did it, psychologically, how did you have this transformation of leaving your passion behind doing research and move to industry, and you founded a company, then you moved to another company? How it felt to let go of it?
Yeah, but the thing is, I have never felt I let go of my passion for science. So I think that's also a great part of being involved in biotech, because you are really still very close to the science part. And for my own personal level, I still do read a lot of science paper. I think am I still on?
I think so.
I still. It's good. Okay. I still read a lot of scientific papers, and I follow the field. I go to scientific meetings and so on when I get the chance. So I never felt that I really left the field. Yeah, I don't think that's needed actually.
Do you ever wish to hold the pipette again?
So I was always very happy wearing the white lab coat. Yeah. But I don't wish to pipette again.
Do you have any other questions?
I think this one is running out of battery or something.
Okay,
so, but maybe it fits with the time. So.
That's all right. I guess a question that's always interesting, it's quite broad, of course, but since you said things have changed a lot since you started, so what kind of advice would you give yourself right now? Like if you could talk.
I think I have always stayed credible both to the science and to, I mean, even when you discuss with investors and so on. I mean, of course you have to sell your story and so on, but you still have to be credible towards the science. I think that is a very important part of the way I work and have always worked.
And have you, I guess, considering this thing of facing, leaving companies behind, moving from one or another, I don't know, do you have any examples of moments that have been particularly challenging, where you had to make, a difficult decision?
I think experiencing the financial crisis, where we were responsible for salary for more than 20 people, and I was first-time CEO ever. That was really a learning curve that still sits in me. So through those months and almost a year when that hit us, that's really my biggest learning and my worst nightmare and so on. It was really a tough time. I know I mean, we all remember the financial crisis for many different reasons and things, but for me it was really tough. And I, of course, since I had never been a CEO before and still new to that part, it was rough. I don't mind to admit that.
And then because you've been a scientist, you've been an executive, you've been on the board of companies, so what are the things you enjoy the most of each of those, or which ones do you think are not that great?
So what I really enjoy, like in general about the biotech scene, and that's of course also why I'm still a part of it, is really, I mean, there is a lot of risk. We all have to take risk to work in this field, because money can go away one day, and we don't have resources to actually build or bring in more money and so forth, or you don't get the results that you should have. So it is a risky part of a work road. But I like the speed. I really like that you have a very short route from you make a decision to you actually can execute on that decision. That's why I have never been part of big pharma, because you have many more layers and so forth. You are a much smaller group that actually work with the same, or should be working with the same values and towards the same goals and so forth. And if you can bring in that energy in your team and really work as a team and so on, there is so much great value to harvest every day, I think. Yeah.
And you've also stuck all this throughout your careers with Immuno, Oncology in general. So what attracts you so much to it? And also, I want to ask you, since you said it's changed so much since you started, how do you see it changing from now on?
Yeah, so I think, again, coming back to ASCO 2013 or 14, that was really a boost of activity in the IO space. And there I really just hoped that I could come back and participate in the developments with some of the technologies that could have a relevance to patients. So what I see for IO in particular is, of course, that chemotherapy is working for some patients, but it's also extremely toxic, and we need better and less toxic treatments to cancer patients in general. And I think that IO in general is actually offering that to almost any indication you can think about. So to me, that is really the driver to be in that field. It's the safety and the less toxic efforts we can bring to the patients.
And in terms of how you see it going in the next few years, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, for our biotech, we are reading out in our largest trial interim data coming out here at the end of this year. Now I'm shaking, but this is of course one of the data points that we have been working on ever since we started the company. It was to validate our clinical data that we actually founded the company on in a large randomized phase 2 trial. And those data are coming out at the end of this year. At the same time, and that is in a very large indication in non-small cell lung cancer. At the same time, we are running many different trials, but one of the trials we are also having data coming out from is a trial in first-line melanoma, actually from Inge Marie's hand. So she is the principal investigator and sponsor of this study. And this is actually showing incredible data that right now, and this is without really overselling, but are the best in the world in melanoma, as can be seen. So we are very excited about this, and currently we are running some validations and securing that we actually have done the right thing with these data. But I can't wait for us to publish that. It'll be so exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so since you've been involved with the multiple companies in Immuno-Oncology, so as you said, it's very popular, there's a lot of people trying to do this, but what would you say are the main challenges for a company or for someone trying to be successful, considering there's so much competitions in the field?
So just going back again to look at the clinical landscape, and with several thousand trials up and running, I think to find your way into the clinic, find the patients, be able to actually run those clinical studies with patient enough in a fast enough way is of course the key to understand the relevance of your technology. So I think that's the biggest headache right now for new companies starting up in that field, is actually to navigate in the clinical landscape. Okay,
so this is something they should plan before they get started with all the basic science?
Engage with all the best clinical advisors you can as early as possible. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, please.
So Mai-Britt, do you think it's possible to continue to build Biotech or a similar company here in Copenhagen, or do you think that you need at some point to establish a foothold in the US?
Establish a foothold in the US. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is something I have been dreaming about with our Biotech. I think that without doubt we have so much value in the company that a US small office or similar would be of tremendous value for the company, both in terms of the value that we can bring to our clinical development, but also in terms, of course, recognition by investors and big pharma, because they are really there.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, please.
Thanks. I was curious, since you mentioned the financial crisis as being a very traumatic but also formative time for you. You say that things are very good at the moment in Copenhagen, but has this formed your view forward as well? Like, is that something that you take into consideration or worry about sometimes, that another financial crisis would do the same kind of thing to you?
No, I'm just by nature not a person that goes and worry about those kind of things, because I mean, as we saw with the financial crisis, I mean, somebody of course were able to foresee that something was about to happen, but no, I don't worry. I hope somebody will take care about it before it hits the same way. Yeah. I mean, to build a biotech, I would not worry about a financial crisis. Then you should follow your passion. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, then. Thanks a lot. Yeah, please. You want to close?